stress is our body's biggest hormone hijacker. And I was so stressed out and I had no idea. And I'll tell you right now, Megan, I'm in that boat again. So flash forward several years, I'm at this state again. Thankfully, I can now recognize that my body is in too stressed of a state and learn to set more boundaries and have more margin in my life. But at that point years ago, I had no idea. And my body was, I was on overdrive. I just went through grad school, started a business. I had way too much going on. And so that was one of my kind of aha moments. I also was drinking a lot of caffeine, a lot of stimulants. I had super low magnesium and hence lots of palpitations and, fast heart rate, which magnesium is a lot safer of an alternative than some beta blockers, right?
Welcome to the Entrepology podcast. I'm your host, Megan Walker. As a former naturopathic doctor and anthropologist, I align the intersection of personal performance, purpose, and innovative thinking in badass women working to change the world as entrepreneurs and go-getters. Entrepology is the study and science of what makes an entrepreneur think, feel, and perform in a path compelled by a vision for helping others, solving problems, while building a life on your own terms. Together, we are exploring the health, mindset, and strategies that distinguish the world's best entrepreneurs. This is the Entrepology Podcast. Welcome to the Entrepology Podcast, episode 214. I'm Megan Walker, former naturopathic doctor and anthropologist, deeply curious about the intersection between health, entrepreneurship, and the mindset and high performance habits that enable us to have massive impact in this world. So while last week we got into 10 awesome categories of biohacks, we're going to take one of those categories a little bit deeper and a little further today. We are talking all about hormones with Dr. Stephanie Gray. And what we're going to get into is the connection between hormone optimization and longevity. Stephanie is a clinician deeply credentialed in being able to look at hormones and their influence on our health, how we biohack, and the influence of hormones in terms of our longevity and high quality living over the long term. And she also shares with us her own health wake-up call that made her realize the importance of taking this route in her work. It was a super interesting episode, deeply relevant to all of us. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Stephanie Gray. Dr. Stephanie Gray, welcome to the Entrepology Podcast.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's my absolute pleasure. This is going to be a really fantastic conversation because we've talked hormones on this platform before, but we've never really plugged hormones into this concept of longevity. And it's an idea and concept and wish that I think so many of us are focused on, but it's actually not normally the conversation. We're focused on these proximate issues of I don't have enough energy, or my periods are a mess, or I want to get pregnant. And I actually really love talking about longevity because it's like what preventative medicine was built to address. How do we live longer with a higher quality of life? And I'm super excited for you to help contribute to this conversation today. So before we do that, can you give everyone a bit of a background on you and why you're so uniquely positioned to help us out today?
Sure. Well, just pertaining to the longevity in general, I wrote this book called Your Longevity Blueprint. And I myself, as a functional medicine practitioner, ran into my own health crisis, as we all do, unfortunately. And that kind of, I would say, shaped the path down me writing it or creating this blueprint, because I think so many of us maybe have focused on just one aspect of our health, but there are so many others for longevity that we may not even think about. And so I wanted to create this analogy that is just as simple as how we maintain our home, right? We all mow hopefully we are mowing our lawns, we're keeping hair out of our drains, we're changing our furnace filters. There are these things that we innately do without even probably thinking about them. But there's so many things that we could do for our body to promote longevity. And I was neglecting a lot of things that I should have been doing for my health, even with all the knowledge that I had. And so I had my health crisis. I'm a female entrepreneur. I have a private practice in Iowa, and one day sitting at my desk, my heart rate took off to the races, like really fast. I had never had anything like this happen to me before. I tried to buzz my husband, who was our office manager, on my phone, but I was so disoriented. I didn't even know like what button to push. And so I tried walking down my hall, and I mean, even just getting to my door was like, I was so disoriented. It was so difficult. And I was, freaking out, super scared. I just had an awesome morning of patience. I didn't think anything was wrong, but clearly I was not in tune with my body. And so walking down my hall, my nurse found me really pale. And long story short, I went to the emergency room and then ended up at Mayo Clinic with tachycardia. And Mayo Clinic told me, you can take a medication to control your heart rate. And I said, I don't think so. I said, I got to figure out what's happening to me, right? Taking the medication wasn't going to get to the root cause of the problem. And that's what functional medicine does. And so I learned through this experience that I needed to create a blueprint for myself to follow, but then I also then applied it to my patients, and ultimately it promotes longevity, and we can get more into that. But that's the short of my story. The other long part is I was also having a fertility struggle at that same point, not to anyone's surprise, right? When my body was in fight or flight and I was all stressed out with high heart rate, my body wasn't ready to, prepare for pregnancy. That was the not on the top of my body's priority list at that point. So again, I had my own kind of health crisis, but I'm happy that I went through that struggle because I'm in better shape now to help my patients. And this longevity blueprint was created as part of that.
And so when you came through that experience, and it is really just so interesting to me that so many naturopathic doctors, functional medicine practitioners, when I feel like 9 times out of 10, if we ask them why they chose to pursue these systems of medicine, they're like, I had my own health crisis and I was dissatisfied with the approach that was handed to me.
Totally.
I think that your story underscores that. And I would love for you to just share some insight that when you came through that and you went, oh, no, like I want to look at the root cause of the problem. When you had that moment of hindsight in your own health, what were some of the key things that you were missing that was probably really obvious, but you were overlooking?
Well, I'll tell you what I say to my patients all the time. Well, and what I need to practice, I need to be practicing what I preach, is that stress is our body's biggest hormone hijacker. And I was so stressed out and I had no idea. And I'll tell you right now, Megan, I'm in that boat again. So flash forward several years, I'm in this state again. Thankfully, I can now recognize that my body is in too stressed of a state and learn to set more boundaries and have more margin in my life. But at that point, years ago, I had no idea. And my body was, I was on overdrive. I just went through grad school, started a business. I had way too much going on. And so that was one of my kind of aha moments. I also was drinking a lot of caffeine, a lot of stimulants. I had super low magnesium and hence lots of palpitations and, fast heart rate, which magnesium is a lot safer of an alternative than some beta blockers, right? My progesterone was super low. Progesterone's the most soothing, calming hormone, great for sleep, anxiety, stress, fertility, right? Everything that I needed at that point. But, no doctor was going to look at my hormones. They wanted to give me medication, right? So I also had at that point, I ended up testing myself for celiac. My blood testing was positive. Had no idea gluten. I cried when I tested myself. I remember my staff brought me my results and I was sitting in front of my computer and I was between patients and I shed a couple tears because I was like, shoot, this is me. I've been advising my patients all these years to go gluten-free. And I never thought that I would need to go gluten-free, but I did. And it changed my life. Every time I have, still to this day, if I have a meal that's cross-contaminated with gluten, I'll have fast heart rate after the meal. And not a lot of conventional providers, well, usually none, will put that together, right? If you go to a cardiologist, they're not going to ask what you're eating per se. Like Mayo wasn't going to put that together, that eating gluten was part of my fast heart rate issue. So I had a lot going on, and as I discuss in my book, but those are just some things that I was blinded to at that point, but I'm thankful that I know now.
Absolutely. And part of it is staying in your, like, we all have lanes and we all have training and we've been taught how to work within the bandwidth of our training. My husband's a physician and it's so funny to listen to us talk about nutrition because I watch each of us like abut our respective trainings all the time. And I just really quickly, I had this physician who worked in my practice and he went on and he founded his own practice. I remember one day he sent me this patient. He's like, I don't know what's going on with her. Like, I need to figure this out. Like, she's not well. And she came in and she had bleeding gums and she had some other things going on. And I looked at her, I was like, tell me what you eat? Because you look like a pirate did getting off a ship like 500 years ago. And I kid you not, she had not had a vegetable in over 3 years.
Wow.
Well, short of potatoes. She's like, I just eat potatoes. I eat potato pancakes. I eat potato this. I was like, you have scurvy. Sure enough, she had scurvy.
Wow.
We got vitamin C into her system.
Wow.
Then all of her symptoms went away. And I called him back and I was like, you've got to ask people what they eat. Like, this is the ultimate extreme example, especially in a developed world context. But it just underscored that sometimes it's just how we're trained.
Mm-hmm.
We're trained to look at pathology in different ways. And the opportunity that's available to all of us is to start to look at our body holistically. This is the gateway to taking radical responsibility for your health. So I would really love to hear from you, Stephanie, when you talk about this notion of the longevity blueprint. What are you talking about? Because it's obviously more than one thing.
Yes. So I'll try to make this short, but essentially I tried to, again, make this comparison between how we maintain our homes and how we should be maintaining our bodies. Again, many of us know better how to take care of the home than our bodies. So what I'm doing, I'm weaving this analogy through the book where I'm comparing an organ system of the body to a certain aspect of the home. So for instance, based on what we were just talking about, Chapter 1 is all about the foundation of the home, and I'm comparing that to the gastrointestinal system of the body. So you can't build a home without a really strong foundation, right? That foundation has to support the weight of the entire house or the house is going to crumble, and the same is true with your body, which many people don't know, right? Well, we know because we work in this avenue of medicine. But you have to have a strong gastrointestinal foundation upon which to build good health. And like with me, of course, I needed to get gluten, and amongst a lot of other foods at that time, out of my diet. So chapter 1 is all about the gastrointestinal system. In chapter 2, I'm talking about the framework of the home, which I'm comparing to your spine in the body. Chapter 3, I'm looking at the electrical work in the home, and I'm comparing that to your genetics, and on and on and on. But my favorite chapter is chapter 6, where I'm comparing the heating and the cooling system of the home to the endocrine system of the body, right? Back to hormones and optimizing hormones. So I wanted to make this easy for patients to know that all the aspects of their home they're maintaining also is true for your body, right? We have to be looking at every single organ system if we want to promote longevity.
It's such a great example because people can understand that if you let your roof leak long enough, it's going to impact the whole framework of the home. And I think our bodies are hard sometimes because we don't have those visual cues. So short of seeing things on our skin or changes in terms of weight, we don't actually understand what's happening underneath the hood. Can you speak a little bit to this notion of stress as the biggest hijacker of our endocrine system? Because stress is one of those things that is entirely ubiquitous in our adult life. I think we've done a really poor job of helping people to acknowledge and register when stress is happening in their body, which is a huge part of your own story. But what does it do when we allow it to run unleashed in our system?
All sorts of bad things to all organ systems. Yeah.
It's very, very bad.
Not only is it going to impact one's glucose, right? One's insulin and glucose that can lead to weight gain, of course. I see a lot of women in middle age come to me and they've packed a lot of pounds around the middle, right? At post-menopause. And a lot of times that's due to high cortisol. So when your body's in a stress state, it's in more of this fight or flight state. It wants to hang on to every calorie, every pound, right? You're not going to lose any weight when you're in a stress state. A lot of those women also have a lot of brain fog. And when you're stressed, when your adrenaline's jacked up, right, you can't think straight. I alluded to earlier, it can rob you of progesterone. And so pertaining to women specifically, although in men, it can rob them of testosterone as well. And actually in women, it'll rob you of more than just progesterone. It can rob you of testosterone and estrogen and thyroid hormones, whatnot. But when you have low progesterone, then you can feel, again, more anxious. You can have more heavy bleeding, more irregular cycles. And with me, I didn't have irregular cycles, but I actually had infertility and secondary to endometriosis. So I had very high estrogen and low progesterone, right? So stress does not set us up for success in any way, shape, or form. And I think with many of my clients who are also entrepreneurs, and I know that's your audience, right? We are type A personalities. We are go-getters, right? We are, we enjoy the ride, the rush, right? We get things done, right? And we follow our passions, which is good. But unfortunately, if we don't set up healthy boundaries and incorporate, like, I have to schedule margin into my life, I pay the price, and I learn the hard way.
Right. And it ultimately comes back to, well, what is the point?
Right.
Why are we building these things at this accelerated pace? Like, what does your ideal life start to look like? And I find and listen, both of us, I think, will fall into this category of people who enjoy achievement, and that there's nothing wrong with those pieces. And I suspect that a lot of people who fall into that category are like, yeah, I hear you. I'm going to deal with stress later,
right?
Because I'm in an achievement zone right now, and I stress is just part of that. And I actually think this is the biggest myth so many entrepreneurs and go-getters miss out on, is that one, stress it's not a fuel to move you forward. And two, you can actually manage and mitigate stress in 1,000,001 ways that will actually accelerate your capacity to achieve. It is not something that is going to necessarily slow you down. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit, Stephanie, in terms of the work that you do as a functional medicine practitioner. How do you offset the impact of stress so that people are really in a state of thrive?
For myself personally, or for my patients?
Both.
Yeah, well, I think deep breathing is, no secret. I think we all know that deep breathing is extremely important to calm the nervous system. Even before our interview today, Megan, just 5 minutes. I didn't have a half an hour, but I had 5 minutes, right? But I just sat there, turned on some calming, it was like some YouTube meditation station, and I just breathed for 5 minutes. And that's what we need to do, because when we're seeing patients, as I was the day that I had that, the first time I had this really high, scary heart rate, I would just go, was going through my day. I was going to work through lunch, no problem. I didn't incorporate that mental downtime and physical downtime. So I think deep breathing is essential. I do a fair share of public speaking, and I've noticed, before getting up on stage, if I will just do a little bit of deep breathing, it goes a lot smoother, right? I've calmed my nervous system. And they're all different coaches available online for various types of deep breathing. So I think that's something that everybody can breathe. Everyone has 5 minutes. Half an hour is better, but to incorporate some deep breathing. Another thing that a lot of my patients who are wanting to lose weight, they come to me, they're doing CrossFit or they're running marathons or whatnot. And I have to, encourage that they not overtrain. I have to encourage they incorporate more yoga, right? More stretching, and then incorporating in that deep breathing with the yoga to calm the cortisol, because when they're constantly working hard and they're doing CrossFit or running, doing cardio all the time, their cortisol is jacked up and they have to allow it to fall. So I do a lot of education on not overtraining with my, high performing patients. I think that's really important. I think just recognizing kind of what you were saying, that hurry is not helpful to anyone, is super important. One of my good friends for Christmas gave me this book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And it was like perfect timing for me, because he talks about how hurry and love are incompatible. Hurry kills relationships. Hurry is a sickness. He says it's a form of violence on the soul. I mean, in this book, he talks about how dangerous hurry is to our lives and to our spiritual lives too, because we're constantly either, doing something, or we're watching something. We're on our phones constantly. Like, put the phone down, put the technology down. Even that's a form of stress on our bodies. So I encourage patients to, when they get home from work, put their phones down, hang out with their kids. At night, put your phone on airplane mode. You don't need to wake up and get on your phone. You don't need to go to bed being on your phone. And sometimes just creating that downtime, that margin is very helpful. So those are just some basic lifestyle strategies that I talk to my patients about.
Yeah, and they're so key. And I think sometimes what we do is we overlook them. And I've been talking to my mother-in-law about this. She might hear this episode. She's gonna be like, oh gosh. But she's been talking about, she's like, okay, how do I sleep better? Like, what are all your sleep things? She's a traditionally trained pediatric oncologist.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I was like, I have a ton of things for you. She's like, amazing. And I said, but first, I'm not unlocking any of them until you go outside and walk for 45 minutes a day in nature, like near trees. Go and walk.
Vitamin N, yeah.
Right. And then I'll talk to you about it. She's like, I know, but like, what else? I'm like, I'm not I'm not telling you any other secrets until you go outside twice a day and like take my Aura ring. Let's monitor what's happening with your HRV and your sleep, but just go outside for 2 weeks. And she, like, true to form, she's like, okay, I'm going to just see what kind of research. I'm like, no, do not PubMed this. Just go and do it. Just blindly follow this advice. She's like, okay.
And the Aura ring will prove
She's great.
The Aura ring will prove it. I mean, if I wear like, blue light blocking glasses at night and I'm reading a book, and I read a book, I am going to get into deeper sleep. I am going to have better sleep score in the morning, right, than if I'm watching TV at night. I mean, it's a fact. The research is there to support it, but we don't always want to admit that there's no pill, potion, or powder that's going to replace lifestyle changes, right? That's the foundation.
100%. I'm going to say one more thing about HRV, and I want to talk about hormones.
Yeah.
But last night I had my first glass of wine I've had in 3 weeks. I was like, we had some Thai food. I was like, I'm just going to have like one small glass of wine. And what's so interesting is that, and if you guys don't have Aura rings, you're going to be like, you either have FOMO or you're like, move on. But my sleep score was the highest it had been in a while because I went to bed early.
Oh.
But my recovery and HRV, my readiness score, was actually lower than it's been over the course of the last 3 weeks because my heart rate was up and my body was warmer.
Yeah.
And that was the wine. And I was like, I had 1/2 glass of wine. And you can start to see the impact. And yeah, it's not going to be catastrophic to my system. And yes, I enjoyed it and it was absolutely fine. But you can see, and I get really obsessed with the things we do every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to have wine every single day, #pandemic living, then we're going to see this accumulated effect in our body. And sometimes, in my experience, stress isn't like, it's not the one thing you're doing. It's all of the small things and how they add up, no different than a bank account. Right. So it was just an interesting observation I thought I would throw down there because I think that is awesome. It totally reinforced for me the impact.
I'm surprised your sleep score wasn't worse. If I have a glass of alcohol, my sleep score is always, terrible. So I'm actually surprised your sleep score came out that good. But obviously you see the impact with HRV.
Yeah. You know where though? Normally I just wake up at 5:30. I woke up at 5:30 and I was like, I don't want to today. And I went back to sleep and I had awesome REM sleep for another hour and 15 minutes. And I think that's what bumped that part, that part up. But we're totally geeking out here on our Aura rings, and
everyone should get one. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so one of the other pieces that I'd really like to make sure that we delve into is just talking a little bit about, we talked how stress affects our hormones, but on this notion of data, how do we look and see what's happening with respect to hormones? Because a traditional blood test from your physician isn't going to cut it. What we're talking about is like the functional workings of what's happening with hormones. How do you analyze these with your patients?
Yeah, I think there are a couple different ways. So one, obviously listen to symptoms, get a comprehensive history, right? I think, and then compare or combine, I should say, rather, the symptoms with the labs. So I think labs are crucial. In my book, I talk about, everyone has a fingerprint, right? Which is unique to their identity. And the same is true with your labs, right? Your labs will help your functional medicine provider formulate a game plan for you. So labs are essential, but there are a lot of different ways to assess labs. So depending on what sort of provider you go to, you need a comprehensive panel run. And my favorite way to test hormones is in the urine, but you can get blood testing done. You can do saliva testing. It kind of depends on what I'm looking at with my patient. For instance, in a cycling woman who is trying to achieve a pregnancy, doing a month-long saliva hormone test where we can look at the hormone fluctuations the whole month is pretty intensive to do, but that may be the most comprehensive assessment that we can gather. If I have a patient who, let's say, has fibroids or cysts and I want to look at their estrogen metabolism, you can't look at metabolism in the blood or the saliva. You have to run a comprehensive urine test for that, which is really important even given just kind of breast cancer rates and risks. We have so many different unfortunate endocrine disrupting chemicals in the environment, which can impact our hormones. And how they impact our hormones boils down to how our liver can handle and clear out those. So we can assess that on a urine hormone test. So that's the Cadillac of all hormone testing. It needs to be done appropriately though. So in a woman who's cycling, we like to check that a week after ovulation. So in a 28-day cycle, we do the test when a day is 19, 20, or 21, because we're anticipating that progesterone is going to peak a week later, right? A week after ovulation. So I want to see if when it's supposed to be high, it is high, or if it's low when it's supposed to be high, we have a problem. So the urine hormone test is by far the best, but there are various ways to test.
What do you do in non-cycling women? So postmenopausal women or women who have any sort of cyclic irregularity?
Yeah, so again, it depends. So I would usually not do saliva testing unless I wanted to look at cortisol. Saliva is a great way of assessing cortisol because women can spit into a tube multiple times throughout the day to kind of look at that circadian rhythm. But in postmenopausal women, if they're really wanting hormone replacement therapy, I provide natural, not synthetic, but natural hormone replacement therapy to many patients here. And one way that I provide that, one out of many, is through hormone pellets. And those are dosed based on blood work. So in a postmenopausal woman who comes to me with the intention of receiving that, then I'll check her levels in the blood. If she really is not interested in hormone replacement therapy, maybe she just wants to, reduce her breast cancer risk, whatnot, then maybe I would opt for the urine test. So it really depends on her complaints. And then and sometimes I do both. If budget allows, both, right? I think the more testing, the better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just love that, people get frustrated when we say the word it depends, but I actually think it depends is a sign of sophistication when it comes to managing one's health. There isn't one diet, there isn't one approach, there isn't one thing. And we all have this unique blueprint. And that's what I love about functional medicine is we go, listen, 90% of what we can say is generally the same, but the gold is in that 10% of individualization. And when we talk about that idea of an individualized course of action with respect to our health and the influence of hormones on our health and on our longevity, I'd love for you to just speak to this notion of how our hormonal health impacts our longevity, how it impacts the quality of living that we can have well into the future. Why does it matter beyond just remedying symptoms in our immediate life?
Yeah. So many times what brings patients to my clinic are those symptoms, right? Women are having severe night sweats, hot flashes. They're having really low libido, whatnot. They're having symptoms for which they come for hormone replacement therapy. But then when they realize the long-term benefits of the therapy, they choose to continue to stay on it even after hot flashes are gone. So I think, heart disease is one of the top killers right now. 1 in 7 women premenopausally are going to have heart disease. But what happens after menopause? That goes up to 1 in 4, almost 1 in 3. So we know estrogen does more, right, than just help with vaginal dryness. It's going to help even our vessels stay very elastic, really helps reduce heart disease. So if we don't want to get heart disease, we need to make sure all our hormones are optimized. Same with bone density. I have, through my training, right, we learn a lot about, well, in my training at least, because I have more conventional training than you, we learn about all the drugs for bone density, which really don't necessarily improve bone density. Sometimes they just keep patients where they're at and bone density doesn't continue to decline year after year. When I started using hormones with my patients, even specifically hormone pellets, I saw bone density improve. So I have seen women over the years go from osteoporosis to total normal bone density, and I have not seen any drug do that through my years of practice. So when we think of bone density, that's important, right? Because we know the risk of mortality, the rate of mortality goes up if you fall and have a fracture. So my mother has bone density issues and I don't want to have those as I age, but I want her on hormones to protect her bones as she ages. And then lastly, memory. So many individuals have dementia / Alzheimer's these days, and hormones really can help improve memory. And I want to preserve my memory as I age. So yes, I don't want to get heart disease. I want to protect my bones and I want to preserve my memory. And hormones have huge strengths in those areas for longevity.
I'm just sitting here as you're talking, I'm like, I want to live forever with all of these things. Probably not forever, but all of these pieces intact. And, I think we talk about, we as in society refer to this notion of anti-aging, and it routinely ends up down some rabbit hole of Botox and our skin. And
right.
I suspect for most people, when we have healthy bones and our cognitive functions are strong and we feel well and invigorated in terms of our sexuality and libido, it's incredible what actually happens to your skin and those physical markers of aging. But can you just talk a little bit about the involvement of hormones around some of those more aesthetic drivers of aging?
Yeah. So estrogen specifically helps with collagen, right? So back to how I was kind of saying earlier, estrogen doesn't just help with hot flashes or vaginal dryness. it's right. You can't always see the skin down there and know that it's frail and, tearing whatnot, and know that you need estrogen in that area. But estrogen is going to help with your skin, even on your face and on your neck, right? If it's going to help with collagen production, it's going to help you look better and keep your skin tighter. When you see that, I'll take smokers, for instance. A lot of smokers who have smoked a lot of their life have very low hormone levels. Smoking specifically will rob one of estrogen. And what does their skin look like? It's wrinkly, it's crinkly, it's gray and sometimes pale, right? It just doesn't look healthy. And that in part is due to the lower hormone levels. So estrogen helps us, helps us remain that great collagen production as well. And when you think of even like a pregnant woman, why do we say, oh, pregnant women are glowing, right? Their estrogen and progesterone levels are through the roof, the highest they are their entire life. And typically their skin is glowing, right? They look good. Hopefully they feel good as well. So hormones do help with the appearance as well of aging.
How late into life can someone leverage supplemental natural hormone replacement therapy?
There's no age at any age. I have 90-year-olds who come to me who want hormones because their friend is on them and still has her memory or whatnot. So there is no age. I think when we think of hormones, I'll just bring this up because I always get this question. The cancer risk comes up, right? Right. And so we think, I can't take hormones because my mother had breast cancer or my sister had breast cancer or whatnot. And that simply is not true. Hormones do not cause cancer. Now, they could feed an aggressive existing cancer. Right? So if someone had an estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, I'm not going to give her estrogen, right, at that time. But if hormones cause cancer, we'd have a bunch of 20-year-olds with low level or who have the higher levels walking around with cancers. And then the 90-year-olds with low levels not getting cancers. And that's just not true. So hormones do not cause cancer. And I will say the hormones that I use. Now, synthetic hormones are a different ballpark. And so that's another conversation, right? I don't give them. Those I do believe can cause cancer, but natural hormones, which are biologically identical to what your body should be making, can be given really at any age. I have patients of all ages, men and women, who come to me for hormone optimization. And the patients I will strongly say the patients that are of older age on hormones look better, feel better. They have their memories. I mean, they look great.
Love this. Beyond hormone management, what are some of the key things that people should be looking at and habits they should be engaging in to optimize their longevity and health long-term?
Yeah, I think nutrition is obviously really important. And that's something that I tell my patients, even from a hormone optimization standpoint, right? If you want to work to boost your hormones naturally, we really want to look at diet, right? So avoiding the sugar, the inflammatory foods like gluten and dairy for many people. Not everybody I don't tell every single patient to go off dairy, but for many people, we can test them, see what food sensitivities they have, and then modify their diet appropriately. Make sure you're eating organic and trying to, not be exposed to herbicides and pesticides and genetically modified foods. Those are just going to confuse your body. They're harder for your body to detoxify from, right? So eating healthy, making sure you're getting all the colors, eating the rainbow, having back to the vegetables that you had talked to that past patient about. We need to be eating a lot of meat and vegetables and fewer processed foods. Many of my patients still need to supplement, and we'll run a nutritional analysis on them. And like me, I was really low on magnesium. Maybe patients are low on magnesium or selenium or zinc or essential fats. I live right in the middle of the U.S. and we just don't have access to fresh fish here. Now we can get frozen fish, right? But we just don't have fresh fish. We don't have a coastal diet, and you probably don't either. So taking fish oil or some sort of essential fatty acids can be extremely helpful. That will impact all of the organ systems for the better from an aging standpoint. And then really looking back at the toxins again, not just in our foods, but in our personal care products. I think that was something I certainly didn't know of throughout my life. And I think that was partially also why I developed endometriosis. I was going to Bath and Body Works and buying all the toxic products, had no idea what impact they'd have on my health.
The more smells, not the better.
No, fragrance is a nasty word for, some synthetic concoction made in, a lab somewhere. So if it smells good, it's probably not good for you. Just use essential oils instead of synthetic fragrances. So I think if we focus on minimizing toxins, reducing stress, focusing on nutrition, generally speaking, that's going to help build our strong foundation and impact longevity for the better.
Beautiful. I love all of that. And if you're listening to this and you're like, I've heard this before, that's because you need to do it. Like there is a reason why we have hundreds of guests on this podcast. And at the end of the day, they're like, here are the core things that you need to take action on in your life. And whatever you need to do to make those fun and exciting green smoothies, do that because it's the small things that add up that are actually going to have this influence. I think this is a perfect place for us to make a transition in the interview. And there's a part near the end that I call our KPIs. So just like we have key performance indicators in our business, I believe we have them in how we live our lives as well. So I've got a few questions for you that are going to give us some insight into your KPIs.
All righty.
You ready? First, I don't know, everyone's like, oh gosh. And it's funny, I'm just going to say, I was on a podcast recently and they're like, we've got rapid fire questions. And I could feel myself instantly like
get nervous
in a fight or flight mode. I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I can't believe I've been doing this to people, but here we are regardless. First question for you. What is your most recommended book? Like if you could give one away besides your awesome book, what would it be?
Well, I love Bob Goff. I don't know if you've read any of his stuff, like Love does. His newest book is called Dream Big. And I think even for your audience, this book was incredible. Now, it is faith-based. I have strong faith, so I'll tell the audience about that. But he talks a lot about just achieving your ambitions, like having ambitions and knowing that, he says people committed, I'll probably murder this, but he says something like people committed to their ambitions don't wait for doors to open. They knock, they ring the door, they camp out, they wait, right? They and I think as entrepreneurs, that book was very motivating for me, to make things happen. Now I say that also in respect to what we've talked about. Make sure you have margin and you set healthy boundaries, but don't be discouraged. He has an amazing life, and he talks about how failures don't disqualify us, they prepare us. And so if I mess up and I reflect back on that, I have to, after reading his book, I really think, okay, this doesn't mean I'm disqualified. This doesn't mean that, I'm a failure. This is preparation. I'm going to do better next time. Reading his book it's just extremely encouraging. And so Dream Big is the name of that book. And it was, I'm going to post the book on my Instagram page because it was that good. So that was the most recent book that I've since ordered several copies on Amazon that I will be gifting to some of my friends.
Love it. What's your favorite health hack?
Oh man, I have so many. I think for me, I'm sure everybody says this. On my podcast, Your Longevity Blueprint, I had put together an episode of the top longevity tips, and I feel like a third of the audience said sleep. I mean, everybody says sleep, but beyond that, for me, it's just I go to bed at 9:00 every night. I don't care what's going on. If there is something I don't know, a TV show or something, I'm not going to watch it. I know for me, I've got to be in bed early. I know that, and for someone else, that doesn't have to be 9:00 for everyone, but for me, getting in bed, having that routine at night, reading, getting my blue light blocking glasses on, taking my magnesium, taking my supplements at night is so important. I don't budge on that. I get into bed early. I know that's what I need to do.
How would you define your purpose?
I think purpose for all of us is just, I guess, following our calling. And I think God's given us all talents, and hopefully we can make a living using our talents, right? But I think my purpose is going back to women in midlife. A lot of women feel like their bodies have betrayed them. And so I believe my gift is to help them step back into their bodies and restore optimal hormone balance so they can regain their figure, their sleep, feel amazing and age well.
Beautiful. And last question for you. Entrepreneurism, are we born this way or do we learn to become entrepreneurs?
That's a really good question. I think I have to say both because I feel like I was born into it. I have entrepreneurs on both sides of the family. My family has started multiple businesses. My parents told me at a young age, they're like, we're not paying for you to go to business school because we've learned the lessons. They said, if you want to go into business, fine, but we're not going to pay for you to go to business school. So I think I was born in it. But I think it can be learned. I have a lot of friends who, chose that path later in life. I think it can be learned. So I'm going to say both.
We will take both. Dr. Stephanie Gray, you're doing so much amazing work in the world. Where can we send people to have access to your Longevity Blueprint podcast, your book? where do we go?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I'd love to have you on the podcast. So
I would love that.
You can go to yourlongevityblueprint.com. My books and blogs, my book and blogs are there. My podcasts are there. Podcasts are, everywhere you can find podcasts. My clinic is also ihhclinic.com, and you can get to that also from the Your Longevity Blueprint site. There is a link for 3 tips to boost your hormones naturally on that site you can check out, and then follow me on Instagram as well at Stephanie Gray DNP.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been so fun.
Thanks for having me on.
Entrepology is the study and science of what makes entrepreneurs tick. It's the confluence of the mindset, strategic thinking, and health that we bring to the table as individuals compelled to create and contribute in this world. It's a lonely place to be at the top. It's a lonely place to feel like you are different, which is why we have our Entrepology Collective, a free Facebook group where women just like you gather to explore the ideas, philosophy, health, optimization, and the notion of purpose that we bring to our lives. The Entrepology Collective is open to anyone. You can find us on Facebook, and it's where people just like you are going to be hanging. Until next week, live life on, in, and with purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Walker, and I will talk to you soon.